Hey there, I know you're on a journey from grief to growth, just like I am, and you may be looking for tools to help you live a more soul aligned life. Well, head over to my Grief to Growth store. It's your one stop shop for inspiration, for healing, and for transformation. Inside there, you're going to find some free resources to help you get started. You'll find guided meditations to calm your mind and reconnect with your spirit. You'll find signed copies of my book, Gems of Healing. You'll find my brand new Oracle deck to help you tap into daily divine guidance. And there's some powerful mini courses designed to fit in your busy life and move you forward one gentle step at a time. So whether you're deep in grief, seeking spiritual growth, or just ready for a reset, there's something waiting for you right now. Just go to grieftogrowth.com/store, grief2growth.com/store, and start exploring. Close your eyes and imagine. What if the things in life that cause us the greatest pain, the things that bring us grief, are challenges? Challenges designed to help us grow, to ultimately become what we were always meant to be. We feel like we've been buried, but what if, like a seed, we've been planted? And having been planted, we grow to become a mighty tree. Now, open your eyes. Open your eyes to this way of viewing life. Come with me as we explore your true, infinite, eternal nature. This is Grief to Growth, and I am your host, Brian Smith. Hey there, I'm Brian Smith, your host here on Grief to Growth, and whether this is your very first time joining us or you're a longtime listener walking this path with me, I want to say welcome to you. The show is all about helping you navigate life's toughest moments and finding meaning, purpose, and even growth on the other side of grief. Together, we explore life's biggest questions, things like who are we, why are we here, where do we go from here? Today's guest is someone whose personal and professional journeys speaks directly to the heart of what we explore on this show. Brenda Snow is a powerful voice in healthcare, a pioneer in patient engagement, and someone who took a life-changing diagnosis and transformed it into a mission that has impacted millions. Brenda is the founder and CEO of Snow Companies and the author of the book Diagnosed, the essential guide to navigating the patient's journey. After being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, Brenda didn't just fight for her own life, she redefined what it means to be a patient. Her book distills 30 years of wisdom into a practical, compassionate guide for anyone navigating chronic illness or caregiving. In today's conversation, we're going to dive into what Brenda calls the unnamed grief of chronic illness, that invisible sense of loss that comes when life doesn't go the way you planned. We'll talk about how illness reshapes identity, the emotional tools we need when our bodies don't cooperate, and how vulnerability can be a surprising source of strength. We'll also explore the role of storytelling and healing, how sharing your journey can break stigma, build community, and even reshape an entire industry. This episode is a powerful reminder that grief isn't always tied to death, and that sometimes a life you didn't expect can become your greatest teacher. So be sure to continue the conversation over on my Substack at grieftogrowth.substack.com, where you'll find an article about the episode, and you can leave comments, ask questions, and connect with me and other listeners. I'd love to hear what you think. And with that, let's welcome Brenda Snow to Grief to Growth.
Hi, Brian. Thank you. Man, that might be the nicest intro I've ever had. I want you to go everywhere with me.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. And as I said in the intro, when we think of grief, we think about the loss of a loved one. We think about the loss of a person. But grief can be the loss of anything that we expect, things that don't turn out the way we expect them to. Yeah. So for you, tell me about your journey and how you got started on this path.
Yeah. So it was, when I became a patient with a life-changing diagnosis, in particularly mine, multiple sclerosis. So, it was back 30 years ago. I was a single mom. I was, doing the work and thing, kind of really the first serious job in my career. And I started having a lot of the very bizarre symptoms. Couldn't really feel my left foot, felt like I had like some, electrical shock coming up my left leg or spiders crawling up me. And I think only if you have MS, you kind of like, I'm always trying to think of an analogy that maybe, I think when you're if you've ever had a body part that falls asleep, like to the point where you can't move it, it
Hmm.
was feeling like this. And that started my journey of going to different healthcare professionals, kind of saying, hey, I think something's wrong with me. I'm a person that has a lot of energy, and I had this overwhelming fatigue, like could not function. Like the thought of like getting out of bed to go to the bathroom was just like not going to even happen.
Mm.
So this persisted for a number of months. And, I got into some various, healthcare professionals. And it's funny, I told you at the beginning of the show, I love the name of your podcast because grief is real, man. And, there was grief after my diagnosis we can talk about. But even the grief you feel when you're not being validated
Mm.
and heard and seen by people you think are supposed to help you. So, I had one physician tell me there's nothing wrong with you. You're just stressed out, single mom.
Yeah.
And that sort of, hurt my self esteem. And I was grieving, well, am I bad because I don't have a spouse, helping me with my daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and grieving that whole loss of a co-parent. And then I went to another health care professional that said it was because I'd had a child, and at this point too, I'd been temporarily lost my vision in my left eye. I'd been like on and off blind, couldn't control my bladder, just randomly would lose control of my urine. And, I said, well, do all ladies that have had babies have this happen to them? Like, this didn't sound right to me either.
Right.
And, so I went home and started to lose hope.
Mm.
And, losing hope, I don't know if you can equate it to a grief per se, but I know when you don't have any hope, your world starts to look very limited.
Yeah.
And yeah, and your choices, if you have no hope, why make a choice? So I started losing hope
Yeah.
and started giving up on myself. And I think the ultimate grief moment for me in trying to seek out a diagnosis was when I had a neurologist. I'm originally from California, so this is a leading neurologist in the San Francisco Bay Area. Basically, look at me and my dad, who had kind of carried me in, and said, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Do you own a firearm? Would you hurt your daughter? Would you jump off the Golden Gate Bridge? And I was like, this is after he examined me in his office. And I
Mhm.
like had this feeling swelling up going, these are weird questions. Like, why is this? And then he just didn't even look at me anymore. He just like turned to my father. I became like persona non grata.
Wow.
And he said to my dad, there's nothing wrong with her. Like
Wow.
she doesn't have an like, like MS or lupus or RA. These had all been things that had kind of been thrown around by talking to friends and neighbors.
Hmm.
He said she's got a severe form of mental illness and needs to be committed today. These are all made up symptoms.
Oh, wow.
And that was really heavy. And I we said I said a word that it's in the book.
Mhm.
I won't use profanity here. Let's just say first word starts with an F, the second word was you, which
Yeah.
confirmed for him, right? That of course, see,
Yeah.
look
Yeah.
at her. She's crazy. Um and so dad got me out of there and put me in the car trying to give me the Snow family pep talk. But that was the day I really first experienced the lowest of lows. And it still remains probably one of the biggest ones, if not the biggest one in my
Wow.
life. Because for 30 seconds or a minute or something, I did question my insanity, my sanity. I was
Right.
like, I was like, this is now the third doctor I've been to, and what's happening to me, and I'm losing my job. So now I have no form of employment. I can't pay for myself. I can't pay for my daughter. I'm sick. What am I going to do? And all these runaway racing thoughts.
Wow. Yeah.
And I gave up. I gave up that day.
Wow.
And I went home and, dad's pep talk didn't work. And it was my young daughter who kind of came in with her big blue eyes and said to me, Mommy, are you going to die?
Mhm.
And I didn't know how to answer that question. Who the hell does? And she was like, I only have you. And it was kind of that mother's love and instinct where I was like, okay, I can't give up on her. Even though I'm giving up on myself, I can't give up on her. So let's try one more doctor. And it was a few weeks later, a very kind physician who listened to me, asked questions, validated me, all of those things, said to me, I don't think you're crazy, Miss Snow. I
Mhm.
don't think, you have these other conditions that have been talked about, but I do suspect that you have multiple sclerosis. We're going to administer you to the hospital today and run some tests to confirm that diagnosis.
Wow.
And that's an interesting feeling for any of your listeners who are dealing with, whether it's a life changing, a chronic, a terminal, is that's the day that also still stands out as one of the most intense days of my life because it was confirmed that I had MS and it was devastating. And that's when the grief really started.
Hmm.
But also on the other side, I was thinking if it has a name and we know what it is, now maybe we can do something about it.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't call
Mhm.
that moment growth yet. I wouldn't, but I would say there was a glimmer of something. But before that glimmer of something really took root, you know, I went through a lot of grief. And it's one of the very first chapters in the book I wrote
Yeah.
because um, I don't know anybody. I have yet to meet somebody, and I've talked to patients all over the world and their families that haven't had grief just hit them bang on in the face when they get the words, you have X condition.
Yeah. Well, there's so much you said in there that's so important. One of the things you talked about was having hope.
Yeah.
And I think that the one thing that humans need is hope. And the
Yeah.
one thing if we have, we can endure pretty much anything is hope.
I
Is
agree.
if we have hope of a better hope of something, that's what we need. That's what we need as humans. So for that hope to be slipping away from you, as you said, that's a form of grief before you even get the diagnosis. And my understanding is MS is very difficult, or at least was very difficult to diagnose. So
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I'm excited to announce I have a great new resource. It's called GEMS, 4 steps to move from grief to joy. And what it is, it's 4 things that I've found that I do on a daily basis to help me to navigate my grief. And I'm offering it to you free of charge. It's a free download. Just go to my website, www.grieftogrowth.com/gems, GEMS, and grab it there for free. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, it's gotten easier with diagnostic tools and diagnostic imaging. I'm happy for patients today, getting a diagnosis
Hmm.
more effectively than perhaps that I did. But again, I think it comes back to, and I don't want to be off topic, but it also comes back to training for
Hmm.
our physicians in this country. I'm speaking specifically now of the United States that, they get 10 minutes on compassion,
Yeah.
humanity, delivering tough news. And so, I would love to see that change because this, while it might be part of your everyday job, just delivering this type of news, it's the only time in your life that you'll
Exactly.
hear this type of news, and it rocks your world and foundation forever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then starts the process.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing that because it does show how complicated grief can be. Like you said, you went from one form of grief with people not believing you and telling you you're mentally ill
Yeah.
to when you get the diagnosis. Well, then there's, my understanding, a lot of times there is a sense of relief. Now there's a name put to it, but now you have to deal with what does this mean?
Yeah. What does it mean? And I think, and it's actually kind of one of my favorite chapters in the book. And there's 5 stages of grief that you've heard about, perhaps read about. And I tried to take readers on this journey of like how grief moves to a form of anger and a form of acceptance. But the grief stage is very nuanced and very layered too, because
Hmm.
early on, the grief was a little bit about poor me,
Hmm.
or, which is really a horrible place to be, what did I do to deserve this?
Yes. Yeah.
And I just want to, every pod that I do, every interview, like I want people to feel with like empathy coming from my heart. You did nothing to
Mhm.
deserve this, because you don't need to layer on guilt too, right?
Yeah.
And you did nothing to deserve this. This is not a form of retribution. This isn't God saying you're a bad person. Whatever it is, it's not the universe putting a spell on you. It's unfortunate, and you did nothing to deserve this. But that part of grief does take hold of it. Like, and poor me, what did I do to deserve this? My life is worthless. Or what am I going to do with my life? I
Hmm.
can't do anything with my life. And this fatalistic, catastrophic thinking can really take hold. And I've seen, people living with conditions just stay in that place for so long and
Hmm.
so long. And then it gets harder and harder and harder to kind of own the grief and work toward the anger around that grief and get to acceptance. And the caveat here is when you work this stage, it doesn't mean that it's not going to come up again, right?
Yeah,
I've
exactly.
had MS for 30 years and, I don't want to get too close to the camera, but, about 2 weeks ago, I had a very bizarre small MS attack that has affected the left side of my face. My smile was a little different. My eye was a little different. And it was kind of a new symptom. And
Hmm.
I was like, oh, I mean, here it is. I'm kind of an old pro at MS, but
Right.
I grieve that. I'm like, okay, I hope that this is not going to be how it is because it's affecting my vision and, externally it looks different. So you're going to always have some of those feelings come up. My goal for people is that you know how to handle them a little bit better
Yeah.
than when you're early diagnosed and acute and really in it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Grief is, what I've realized is grief is not actually an emotion. It's more of a container of
Yeah.
emotions, and it's something that we process and we go through. But we do have these attendant emotions, these parasitic emotions that kind of come along with it. And guilt is. It's funny you mentioned guilt because I'm just working on a course I'm finishing up on guilt and grief. There's something about the human nature that says somebody's got to be to blame. Something's got to be to blame. So we will even turn to ourselves. I'm to blame. What did I do wrong? I must be a bad person. God is punishing me. And those things are not helpful at all.
No, no, they're really not helpful. And I always say, whether it's been in business when I've had been a mentor to somebody, or my adult daughter, or other patients, you have to be really careful of the soundtrack that you play in your brain,
Absolutely.
right? Because
Absolutely.
can become a form of reality. And this is not the time to get into a place of like self hatred or playing a tune that is self berating. This
Mhm.
is a time for you. And even if you have to sort of fake it, right? Even if you have to sort of tell yourself for a while, I will get through this, I will have hope, it will be okay. I will build a network. I will surround myself with the right people, the right healthcare team, form of manifesting really in a way, right? But
Yeah.
it kind of helps move you toward action and just little bits at a time. When you hear, like I've worked a lot in breast cancer and different forms of cancer. I mean, some of them terminal. I mean, this is mind-blowingly difficult. So you can't process everything in a day.
Right.
You
Right.
just can't. You can't process everything in a week. And that's okay, man. That's okay. And what do they say? You can eat an elephant one bite at a time. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
just take it as it comes. And if all you can do on that day is, get a name of a doctor that might have some hope and promise for help, terrific. Put that sort of like in a place in the box, to use your analogy, that starts to make the grief, make the anger, make the guilt a bit less.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you got the diagnosis, how did it initially affect your sense of identity?
Oh, it was gone. It
Mm,
was gone. I mean, first of all, from a physicality perspective, I was in my late 20s, using a cane.
mm,
So that was what old people needed, right? In my mind. So it was basically physically, I looked different. I had to take a medication that put a tremendous amount of weight on my frame. Um, I slowly deteriorated, and then it was a wheelchair.
mm.
The medication made a lot of my hair fall out. Like, it was externally hard, but internally it was extremely hard because cognitively I
Mhm.
started to be a little slower. Word searching, fine, like, or memory. Like, I knew there was something, but this is when I was acute, having a very big MS attack.
Mhm.
So my thinking was a bit muddled. Like I said, I lost my form of employment, so I had no money. And if I didn't have a family that had some financial resources, I mean, my daughter and I would be out on the street. We'd be homeless. I couldn't pay the rent.
Mhm.
Um, and these things add a whole nother layer of complexity to grief.
Absolutely.
And then I think the thing that sometimes people don't think about, and I really didn't think about it when I was in it, only thought about it when I was writing the book. You can get into this place where you're mourning all these things and grieving all these things that haven't even been your future yet, that haven't even come to fruition, that
Yeah.
haven't even been there. And it can become a form of catastrophic thinking. I was grieving all kinds of things. I'm going to lose this. This is not going to happen. Blah, 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 blah. And that actually wasn't even my reality.
Mhm.
So even more important to stay present because it can be a runaway train if you start grieving these phantom things. So
Yeah.
what and now in retrospective, what was real is I was grieving the loss of my body. I was grieving the ill effects that MS had on me. And I was, grieving the changes with my dynamic with my daughter
Mhm.
and the fact that I didn't have a job. So I can now say the grief was around these things.
Mhm.
And if anybody's at this place right now, those are the things to focus on to try to start to solve. Don't try to grieve things that you think you're not going to be able to have or do 30 years from now. You just don't know that yet.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's what's great about perspective, and you sharing your story now because what was the prognosis 30 years ago when they told you you had MS? What did they tell
That
you
I
was
would
going to happen to you?
never walk again. Yes,
Wow.
they told me that. And for those people that know me, I'm a little competitive, and all you have to do is tell me I can't do something, and then there's this there's a switch in my head.
Mhm.
But that's not necessarily the reason why I was able to walk again. So I want to make sure I'm not spreading false information. There's enough of that out there today. So
Sure.
MS is a neurological condition of the brain and the spinal cord. It demyelinates parts, and that's like the communication channel. So if you have a demyelinating, lesion at a part in the brain and spinal cord. It's like real estate, location, location, location. That will affect what you're able to do. Some people have a more mild form of a relapsing MS. Some people have a primary form of the disease, which is much hard to see a lot of any kind of reversal or going back to a baseline. So I have a relapsing form that's probably now in retrospect, because I was treated early and treated pretty aggressively, has not progressed like statistics were when patients were untreated. So for about 3.5 years, I did have attack after attack and struggled with, walker, cane, wheelchair. That was sort of the repertoire. Physical therapy 3 times a week, occupational therapy 3 times a week. And I received one of the first FDA approved drugs for the treatment of relapsing MS, which I think wasn't the whole story, but it was part of my treatment paradigm, if you will, that I think helped my outcome. But also I have to say, Dad's right. Power of positive thinking played a big role too. I started to, shed the grief, get over being so effing pissed off, and let go of some of that anger, tried to accept this. And I remember, and I write this in the book, I kind of remember the day, and this was headed to my growth part. It still sort of chokes me up and makes me a bit teary, that I was thinking about MS like a really awful weed in your tomato garden. And you're from Ohio, so I'll tell you this story. My family's also from Ohio, and they take such pride at growing these beautiful tomatoes. Nothing like a beefsteak tomato, right? From a
Right.
garden in Ohio. Every summer we had them. And I thought about like this weed in the garden just strangling out the beauty of this plant. And I kind of thought that's what I was allowing MS to do to me. And that I still had, fruit to bear, and I still had a life to live. At this time, I was just only 30 years old. And I thought, instead of viewing this as something external, like a force happening to me and assaulting me, I need to realize it's part of me, and I need to take its hand. I remember the imagery I used. I need to hold its little hand in that garden and walk across and make MS part of who I am.
Wow. Wow.
So that was kind of the day for me that I was like, okay, now that you've fully accepted this, and ironically, the beauty of it, that's what makes me tear up. Now you can maybe grow and reimagine a new you.
Yeah. I was going to ask you to describe the difference between acceptance and giving up. And I think you just said it beautifully right there.
Thank you.
It's not that we're trying to fight the disease or the pain or even the emotions, the guilt and the anger and the sadness. We accept them as part of us. We resolve them, and then we move forward with that.
Yeah.
So there's a difference between accepting and giving up.
I completely agree. And I think giving up, you end up staying in grief and anger too,
Yeah, exactly. Right.
100%. So it is like, and if, again, not that you're not going to have that come up at sometimes, but that acceptance is really where the turning point happens, the growth happens, the joy happens. And for me, I remember thinking, okay, well, I'm going to have to do things differently. I might be making breakfast for my daughter, putting toast in the toaster for her to go to school in a wheelchair, but at least I'm up doing it for her, right?
Right.
And she will have core memories that her mom fought hard and was present for her. And that became more important to me than, you know, not doing it like the other moms.
Yeah. So you late 20s, early 30s when
Yeah.
you got this
Yeah.
this diagnosis and are dealing with this MS. How did this change what your view was of your life's purpose?
Yeah. So my life's purpose before, I think like probably any young person, I hadn't given a ton of thought to. It was go to work, pay the bills, enjoy my kid, have some fun, that type of thing. After I became sick and I spent like the first 18 months, almost the majority of it in and out of hospitals, particularly one long stay where I did have my 30th birthday and rang in the new year for 3 months in a long-term rehabilitation center.
Mm.
And, that was incredibly difficult and incredibly humbling. I mean, the average age in there were end stage of life, 80 plus with not MS, no
Yeah.
like dementia, nobody like me. And but the empathy, I think, that started to really, I think I've always had like a strong empathetic part of me, a strong intuitive part of me, a strong caring part of me. That just was like magnified,
Mm.
Often sometimes think of the Grinch when you see that holiday show, The Grinch, his heart was small and it just grew bigger. Like the more he gave and the more he accepted, the bigger his heart get. Not that I was Grinchy, but,
Right.
but
Right.
I think it just amplified that I hated seeing people suffering. And I hated seeing people suffering where nobody stopped to kind of to care. It was really transactional. They would come in and make me do this test and that test and throw the food down and, drink. And like, it wasn't, it wasn't anybody really caring about me
Mm.
or any of these other people. And that really became a life's purpose for me. I was like, I deeply care
Hmm.
and I want to do something so nobody ever has to feel as lousy as I felt these last 3 months.
Hmm.
And, that was one of the bases of my company. And it's why I do so much philanthropy work and give back because I'm lucky that I'm able to.
Hmm.
I'm lucky that I want to. And MS, that is the beauty of my diagnosis of really trying to connect with people and let them know that there is hope and they're not alone and somebody does give a damn.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about snow companies.
Well, I think the first thing I will tell you is it was a joy to build. I was a sort of an accidental entrepreneur. I had no idea what I was doing, but when I got to a point that I knew that I needed some type of job to pay the bills
Hmm.
and was better, I'm going to put air quotes around better because, again, it's a chronic condition. There's
Hmm.
no cure for it, but able to do more is
Hmm.
probably an adequate way to say it.
Sure.
My experience as a patient sort of highlighted a lot of what I thought were some unmet needs out there. And I had found, because I'm a talker and I care, that every place I was going, I was talking about MS and how to make people feel better and how in turn the gift back to me, it made me feel so much better. I
Hmm.
thought, wow, there's real power in narrative and storytelling. And long before it became, a buzz thing. And so I was approaching different nonprofit organizations and saying, hey, I think that there's ways instead of these support groups that feel like a pity party, there's got to be ways to get people connected to share tips and strategies and positivity and hope so that our lives feel a little less heavy.
Hmm.
And then I learned, yeah, I mean, they're doing all this great, fantastic fundraising work to keep the lights on and to help their, constituents, if you will. And there's just no budget for consultants or whatever you want to call it. And so it was one day that the FDA approved drug I talked about was sent to me. And I was kind of trying to figure out how the heck to do this and what it meant. And, at this time, my doctor didn't even really know. It was just the first time ever.
Mm.
I thought to myself, oh my God, the people that make this stuff probably never even talked to somebody like me. So that was how I kind of opened the door to my work in the life science industry, specifically in biotech, because I boldly had my father drive me, because I still had impaired vision, to the company that makes this, and banged on the door, which I've since learned sort of sends off alarm bells. But that's sort of my personality type. And they were very gracious, friends with the woman who was the marketing director then, and still friendly with her today. She gave a nice shout out when the book came out. And I said, hey, why aren't you working with patients? Like, you have this drug that is appropriate for some people, not for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really starting to be effective for me. But I can tell you've never talked to a patient. So we exchanged phone numbers, and over the course of a couple of weeks, it was like, you're right, we never have.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, wow. So I shared my story. I wrote my first patient narrative story, and was invited back to speak to the team of scientists who took this molecule, through to approvals, and talked to a bunch of people there. And then that started off my kind of career as a consultant, and building things like, these are products that you have to inject or infuse. So why isn't there a nurse available for you 24/7? That had not been really done before. So if you're a patient and you can't get a hold of your doctor, like, who are you going to call, right? How are you going to answer some of these questions? So that led into a few years later founding Snow, really with the focus on connecting people, with the same kind of conditions, with inspiring voices, with tips and strategies through a variety now of platforms and ways to connect. Not the commercials on TV. I'm not talking about that stuff. We don't do anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Really, people that are engaged and want a dialogue. And so it's, just grew year over year over year. This May, I did step away as the daily CEO with a lot of mixed emotions, but I have the most amazing successor that I feel blessed that I got to sort of hand choose and groom.
Mm-hmm.
And, my career focus now is the book. I'm writing a second book. And like I said, my philanthropy work. So,
Yeah.
but it was the ride of a lifetime. I learned a lot about business. And again, if you told me 30 years ago I would go on to win an award, build an award-winning business that disrupted the life science industry and employs 425 people globally today, I would have told you what that doctor told me. You're crazy.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So it's support for people that have chronic illnesses. Is that right?
Yes. So
Okay.
all kinds of life-changing dividends. So patient education,
Mm-hmm.
patient support, again, connecting with people like you. Yeah. So, and I think it's really, at least, the people that I've worked with and heard from, whether they were kind of sharing their story or they were touched by somebody's life. I've got cabinets full of lots of wonderful letters and cards and poems for the staff and the team, that has, helped make these connections. And I think it's made people feel they're not alone. And that's the number one thing that you definitely want to feel when you're living with a life-changing illness, that you're not alone.
Yeah, that's amazing. So how long would you say it was after your diagnosis before you got the inspiration to start Snow?
So I was diagnosed in 93. By like mid 96, 97, I was kind of doing the consulting thing.
Mm.
And when I saw that there was a lot of power in that, like every place I went to share my story, I had a cue like to talk to me, and, like I was, I don't know, somebody really important and famous, even though I
Mhm.
wasn't. So I was like, wow, this is working. Like, people really want to talk and engage. And so then I formalized in the form of a corporation in 2001.
Okay. I wanted to give that timeline because, when we get devastating news like this, a life-changing illness or the loss of a person or whatever it is that triggers a grief event,
Yeah.
we can get really narrowly focused and go into all those emotions and feel like this is it. It's over. My analogy is my brand is grief to growth, planted, not buried. We feel like we've
Oh,
been
I like
buried.
that.
We feel like, because when you bury something, it's not coming back, right? We bury things to get rid of them. But you can look at it as being planted. But the thing is that early phase, right? When you first plant a seed, or when the caterpillar goes into the cocoon, it's pretty ugly. It's ugly during that time. So I want people to understand we have to be patient, as I think we talked about before. We don't make these transformations overnight. What we can have in that early phase is just hope. We talked, circling back around to hope that something can come of this. I just don't know what it is yet.
Yeah. And I think it's important to just not give up on yourself, right? It would have been really easy for me to mm, give up on myself because when you're feeling low, tired, sick, depressed, in grief mode, anger mode, it's not like you have the thoughts and are like, great, well, I'm not going to give up on me today because something awesome's going to happen. No,
Right.
it's really, really hard. So have that patience. And I tell people, pick the little wins to help rebuild
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
Pick the little wins. I told you about making that toast. I mean, most people would think, hello, but that was something that I focused on. I was so proud of that I'm talking about it 30 years later,
Hmm.
that I was able to do that. And so I just focused on the little wins, and that started to kind of put me back together. And every time that I could do something more that I didn't think I could do, or every time I achieved something, or if I was letting go of crippling emotions, I remembered to tell myself, right on, you're doing great, girl. And that's what I think people need to remember to do. Otherwise, you can just keep berating yourself.
I love that. That is so important. And I find with my clients so often they neglect how resilient they are, how far they've come. The fact that you got out of bed this morning. I tell people you've lost a child, you've lost a spouse, whatever. You got out of bed and you got dressed.
Yes.
That's an accomplishment. And we don't do enough of that positive self-talk, which
Hmm.
encourages us to take the next step. We can always focus on what we don't have and what we can't do, but that's not helpful.
No, it's not. And, over the years, I think just you mentioning, people that lost a spouse or a child, I've unfortunately, been to too many funerals in this line of work. And, my hats off to those who, especially with the death of the child. It's I'm working on, like I told you, the second book, and conducted an interview last week, and I can't even imagine, the hard work and the grief and the pain. So just a shout out to your audience who are in that space. It's I can't imagine how it feels, but I have so much respect for people going through that just sending a big virtual hug.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, the thing about grief is it's both unique and universal. You
Yeah,
know,
isn't
every,
that the
every
truth?
every loss is different, whether it's again loss of a person, loss of a pet, loss of your health, whatever. That's unique, but there's also some universal things about it. It's that it it rips us down to our core. We kind of have to rebuild and start over again, but it can be a growth opportunity if we allow it to be that.
Yeah, I really love the way you said that. That was beautiful. That's bang on, perfect. Guess that's why you're hosting this podcast.
Well, as I said, I've been fortunate enough to talk to a lot of people that have been through it,
Yeah,
and I love talking to people like yourself because I remember what it must have been like for you to get the diagnosis, or like was for me when my daughter passed away,
yeah,
and I know that the darkness. that you feel like there is no, and so I want to put out people like you that can inspire people to say, again, I don't know how I'm going to get there, but if Brenda can get there, then maybe I can get there eventually too.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we're all a lot stronger than we think we are. And when people look at people like you, and maybe some people look at people like me and say, "Oh, they're different. There's something special about them," and there's not.
No, 100%. I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. I think everybody has that intrinsic desire um, to find joy, and like you said, to find a life's purpose, in spite of terrible, tragic events in one's life.
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean that isn't going to still come up on occasion, but um, you are definitely worth finding a place of peace, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about more about your book, Diagnose: The Essential Guide to Navigating the Patient's Journey. What are
Yeah.
people going to find when they pick up your book?
They are going to read, well, it's the book I wish I'd had 30 years ago. I can tell you
Mm.
that. And they're going to have some things that make them laugh and things that make them cry. And it's not a memoir, but there are some crazy stories about my my journey that, like I said, I think people, well, I have heard that people have found insightful. You mentioned one, we talked about it a little bit, the identity earthquake,
Hmm.
that happens for a lot of people and keeps you in the grief and the anger cycle. But I think what I tried to do, like there's 5 stages of grief, I tried to sort of um, write a book that says this is about what you're to expect. Here's the stages that you're going to go through of emotions on the front half of the book, and sort of the second half of the book is, you know, what are some thoughts, and I opine a little bit on how you go forward and build a life of meaning and purpose. Resiliency is a great chapter in there.
Hmm.
So I think, you can open the book at any place, and, I mean, you can read it cover to cover, of course, but, I think if you're having a particularly bad day or you're stuck on something, you can just kind of open that chapter and
Hmm.
probably find something in there. I love that there's also a little bit of things in there for the caregiver, not a lot, but it's why I've decided to write a second book, because a lot of the response I got was like, wow, this really hit for me, but I'm not the patient, but this part was great. Are you going to write something for caregiving? And then sort of I have an idea, and I'm in the early stages. I'm like first chapter in,
Hmm.
but I think, the book's not for just MS patients. I think it's, anybody that's had a life-changing diagnosis will find some value in this book, find some humor in this book.
Hmm.
Brian, they're going to find a few dirty words too. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Second book, I'll have less. This one was cathartic. I needed to get it out.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. So, sometimes you have to let those things out because you really want to. I mean, you have to express these emotions.
Yeah.
Think about all these emotions we're talking about is they have to be felt, they have to be honored, they have to be expressed. When we try to suppress them,
Mhm.
they just hang around,
They
and
do.
that's when they really do the damage. So,
100%. And at
yeah,
some point, just like a volcano, they are going to come out, and then you're going to be heavy in resentment, heavy in guilt. It's going to maybe blow up your relationships at home. I mean, yeah. So
yeah,
it's a courageous conversation. You have to be vulnerable. You have to be okay with letting people see the raw parts of you,
yeah,
and inviting people to show that to you too.
yeah. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the importance of being vulnerable.
Yeah, well, I think again, that's one of the blessings for MS for me that sort of became a superpower. I mean, I am what you see is what you get. I'm totally okay with being vulnerable. And it's very freeing. It is very freeing. If you can develop the skills in a productive, adult, meaningful way about your deepest, darkest emotions, your fears, the things you feel insecure about, and in kind have it validated or reciprocated. I mean, this is the holy grail of communication, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
In my opinion. So, I think there's been times that I was afraid to have my voice about what I needed. And then after a few times where I suffered due to that, I said, forget it. It's like for me, and it's truly vulnerability is truly living your authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the very definition. So, I think there's ways that I've kind of coached people, like door openers, if you're afraid to be vulnerable. But, like, let's say you have a caregiving partner in your house and, you are very, very nervous because you see that their attitudes changed a little bit or your relationship isn't what it was. A lot of people default to not saying anything, like you said, or getting really crunchy
Yeah.
with each other. I think it's really okay to have check ins, scheduled check ins, and say, are you okay right now to be a part of hearing that I'm feeling in a way that's really heavy? Or are you okay for me right now, Brian, to ask you some questions because I'm feeling, some nonverbal communication or energy from you
Mm-hmm.
that I want to clear up because you matter to me?
Mm-hmm.
And can we have that conversation right now? 99% of the time, people are going to say, yeah,
Yeah.
thanks, man. That's brave, right?
Right.
So very rarely have I heard stories over the year of somebody turning around and telling somebody, screw you, I'm not talking to you. I mean, I'm sure there's somebody out there that's done that. But when you're brave enough to do it, it comes back to you.
Yeah. I think that's so important. I have a friend that passed recently from ALS.
Mm.
And she wrote a great book. And it's funny you're talking about some curse words being in your book, and uh, she had a real potty mouth. So,
All
uh,
right. I like her already.
yeah, so she was like trying to come up with the title for a book, and she was going to say, I wrote this with my F and I's. You should read it with yours. Because she got to the point where she couldn't type. She had to use her eyes to
Yeah.
control the computer.
Yeah.
But one of the best books I've ever read,
Oh, I'll have to get
so
that.
vulnerable and talking about, her relationship with her husband, her caregiver.
Yeah.
And that's what we really want. We want authentic connection with people. We want to know that people deep down are just like we are. And if I see someone like yourself and I just put you up on a pedestal and say, well, she's just this dynamic person, she started this company, blah, 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 then I can't see myself in that. I can see myself when you tell me about the pain that you went through and the despair you went through. I can see myself in that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. And that's why I have been completely open for the entire time. I remember even getting counsel at one point from somebody that said, you're trying to get a job. You should never tell anybody that you have multiple sclerosis. You have to hide all of this. Like, you got to make sure you never take that cane out. Like, nobody. And I mean, to me, that was kind of like, I mean, there are some people that are comfortable with that and you do you.
Right.
But for me, I was like, no, because for me to spread awareness, to keep giving hope to others, but to myself too,
Yeah.
I have to speak my truth about this condition and about how I feel. And, even my daughter, a lot of people hide it from their kids. And I gave her age appropriate information as we went along, but she was, I was very, very vulnerable with her too, because otherwise little people make up stuff in their head.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They know something's going on. If you don't tell them the truth,
100% they do.
they're gonna make up something which is probably gonna be far worse than the truth.
Yeah, like she thought I was going to die. Once I got the diagnosis of MS, I knew I wasn't going to die from it. So
Yeah.
immediately I could reassure that because I sat down and told her, and what a 5-year-old could understand what was going on. But every year she got older, that became a different conversation. And she's amazing.
Yeah. So we've touched on this a little bit, but what are some changes you think need to be made to the healthcare system, having been through this for the past 30 plus years?
Well, this is a very, very big question, and we could have a whole other hour on it. And I'll just add this, disclaimer and caveat that, you know, I am not an expert in the areas of insurance and things like that. But, you hear in the news, previous administration, the administration now, whatever, it's been a topic for a conversation for a long time. The price of drugs is problematic. You can get some of these same therapies in other countries at a very different price point than here as Americans. And as a result of that, there are patient communities that have unmet needs. They have literacy issues. There's a whole host of things that I, actually worked in with my company, that these patients are not getting because they're being treated suboptimally. So that is something that I feel needs to be addressed, because it should not matter, what your bank account looks like, the color of your skin, your gender, who you love. It shouldn't matter. If you are getting diagnosed with something, all of us should have the ability to get and receive care that we need. For me, period. That's the end of discussion. So how do we address that? You know, that's tough. I have some ideas, but again,
Yeah, well,
it's a big
interesting,
conversation.
and I'm not scared to say it. The fact that healthcare is a right, I don't think should be a controversial opinion. I don't think it should be a political thing.
No.
Now, how we do it, that's up for debate.
Yeah.
But I completely agree with what you're saying. I think that people have a right to have access to
Yeah.
to to, to life. It's
Yeah.
access to
And,
life.
and in my career, I mean, this is the saddest of stories. I cannot tell you how many people had a condition where there was, it happened in cancer and a few other, where there was a medication that could literally prolong their life, give them more time with their families, give them more time. And they were denied access to it because it wasn't approved.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they died early. For me, this is a problem. I think also I touched on it before. People going into the field of medicine, I have mad respect for. I do think from a medical school type of education, even when people go on to do their advanced training and their advanced degrees, we do need to put more emphasis on looking at people as a whole, as a person,
Yeah.
as a just like them and their family,
Right.
right? And have some more training on how to have productive conversations, deliver hard news, be empathetic long term in the care of that patient. I will have this shit till the day I die, right?
Right.
So that's not a transactional relationship between me and my doctor.
Right.
And that's one that I need to be with a human on that journey. So I think that can be something that maybe perhaps that we can do better, providing that kind of training. And as I'm thinking about this caregiving book, and you really look at the pressure of the sandwich generation, meaning they're caring for older patients while they still have kids or dependently financial kids under thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about squeezed. So there's like a whole world of caregiving that's undersupported, underfunded, undervalued. And I think as we have this aging population, that's going to need probably a few more solutions than we currently have in our toolbox.
Yeah. Well, it's a good point about the aging populations. My mother-in-law and my father both went through care, long-term care at the end of their lives, and just trying to find qualified people to work in those places is almost impossible. And then
Yeah.
we all complain about the care that they give, but we don't take care of the caregivers.
Correct. And I hope to shine a light on that here, if I can get the book done quick enough and out and published. But yeah. And then also, we have a shortage of people wanting to go into medicine.
Right.
And that's gonna at some point become a problem to Ruth. So how do we motivate people? Or then we're going to see the advent of artificial intelligence, AI, coming in the treatment of healthcare. So again, I don't have all those answers, but certainly, is it going to disrupt? Is it going to be favorable, not favorable? Time will tell.
Yeah. Well, Brenda, your story, your life is just so incredible and so inspiring, and I love your energy,
Thank
and I
you.
love your giving back to people and giving people hope. So, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to cover?
No, I just think, like I said, if the book is available on Amazon, it was a bestseller. I'm proud of that. But if people want to buy it, just know that all of my personal proceeds are getting donated to charity. But the other thing is, like I talked about, unmet needs in the patient population. If somebody wants a copy of the book that has need, you can go to my website, brenda@brendasnow.com, and I'm happy to send a signed copy.
Okay. So your
Just,
website is brendasnow.com, is that correct?
it's brendasnow.com, and my email is brenda@brendasnow.com.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And remind people the name of the book again.
It's Diagnosed: The Essential Guide to Navigating the Patient Journey.
Awesome. Well, it's been great spending time with you this afternoon.
Thank
Again,
you.
thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for what you put out into the world. And
You
enjoy
too.
the rest of your day.
You too. You were great. My pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Have you ever wished for gentle guidance or a comforting word exactly when you need it most? Well, I've created my Love Lives On Oracle deck just for that purpose. Now, this isn't a deck that's about predictions, it's about connection. Every card has been thoughtfully designed to guide you through life's toughest moments, to illuminate your path and help to remind you that you're never alone, that your loved ones are always there right beside you. So whether you're seeking clarity, comfort, or a loving message from beyond, each card is here to speak directly to your soul. And along with the deck comes a downloadable PDF guide that you can use that will give you an affirmation for the day, something to reflect on, and even an activity to do to keep you connected to your loved one. So check out the Love Lives On Oracle deck today. You can get it at stan.store/grief to growth. Stan.store, STAN.store/grief, numeral 2, growth.